Ms. Usha Monari, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Associate Administrator for the United Nations Development Programme. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to deliver the opening remarks for this dialogue. The theme of promoting sustainable development goal-sensitive investments is most apt. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a major setback for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Even before the pandemic struck, progress towards the 17 SDGs was already patchy. Progress has now slowed even further, and in some cases, seen reversals. The numbers from the latest Sustainable Development Goals Report 2021 are cause for concern. Global extreme poverty rose for the first time since 1998. Between 119 and 124 million people have been pushed back into poverty and chronic hunger. As we recover from the pandemic, we must build back our societies in a more resilient and sustainable way. And this will not be easy. Beyond tighter fiscal constraints, there are other broader challenges. For example, our current consumption of the finite planetary resources is unsustainable. Our water, sanitation, food supply infrastructure remain inadequate and vulnerable in many parts of the world. The pandemic has also exposed and exacerbated problems such as inequality within and between nations. If we do not address these issues head-on, our world will not have the capacity to tackle greater challenges like climate change or future pandemics. The SDGs have been an important roadmap for humanity as agreed by over 190 countries in 2015. The development gaps which the pandemic revealed are precisely the challenges which the SDGs aim to address. What we need now is more effective mobilization of financing for SDG-sensitive investments to fill these development gaps, especially when fiscal resources have become more constrained due to the pandemic. Finance plays an essential role in channeling resources to the right priorities, and the need for sustainable financing is great. The good news is that banks and investors are increasingly taking environmental, social, and governance factors, or ESG for short, into account when deciding where to invest. About 1/5 of all assets worldwide are now in funds that use some form of ESG criteria. For example, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the MAS, has committed US $1.8 billion of its reserves to climate-related investments. However, the current global level of SDG investment is far from sufficient. According to the OECD, an estimated US $7 trillion in infrastructure investments is needed each year till 2030 to meet climate and development objectives. ASEAN alone will need an estimated US $200 billion in green investments annually through 2030 in order to achieve long-term sustainable economic growth. The challenges in enhancing sustainable financing are well known. First, many companies do not keep reliable or transparent climate-related data such as their projects' emission trajectories or energy consumption. Climate-related financial disclosure standards are still being developed. These gaps can give room for selective reporting and inconsistent disclosures by companies, making it difficult for investors to make SDG-sensitive decisions. Second, there is no common definition or taxonomy for activities that contribute to climate goals. Without a common understanding of what activities are green, cross-border green finance flows will be constrained. Third, many companies lack the expertise to quantify environmental costs and the benefits of their projects. This is where governments, monetary authorities, and the private sector need to work together to create an ecosystem for sustainable financing to take off. Each has a role to play. Let me elaborate. First, governments must lead the way by laying out the vision, the framework, and the rules for sustainable financing. In Singapore, the government launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030 in 2021, an ambitious long-term plan to build a green, livable, and sustainable future, which covers areas from our infrastructure, urban planning, and to building a green economy. This clear direction sends a message to the private sector to shift their investment position and to recognize that ESG is consistent with their fiduciary duties. Equally important, governments must raise public awareness of the SDGs and build capabilities to deliver on SDG investment. This includes engaging relevant partners to equip our people with the knowledge and skills needed. In this connection, Singapore is pleased to host the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development, which has partnered our agencies to co-create innovative solutions for sustainable development in areas such as digital agriculture, smart cities, and sustainable finance. Second, monetary authorities will need to complement the government's efforts to develop the green finance solutions and markets. This may include the promotion of sustainable financing instruments, as well as the development of a common taxonomy on sustainable activities for financial institutions. MES has been very active in these areas. More than 8 billion Singapore dollars in green, social, and sustainability bonds have been issued in Singapore since 2017 to provide the private sector with the incentives to embed sustainability considerations in their financing decisions. MES also convened a Green Finance Industry Task Force to develop an industry taxonomy for Singapore-based financial institutions. MES is actively participating in efforts to develop a regional taxonomy, taking into account international goals while tailoring it to ASEAN's context. MES is setting out roadmaps for mandatory climate-related financial disclosures by financial institutions and listed entities, which will facilitate the comparison of climate-related investments. My colleague, Dr. Vivian, Chief Sustainability Officer from MES, will shed more light on this. Lastly, the private sector is a crucial player. There are greater expectations from investors and consumers that companies incorporate ESG and channel resources towards sustainable business activities. These developments will drive SDG investments and should be scaled up. One example in Singapore is the Climate Impact X, a joint initiative by Temasek, DBS, SGX, and the Standard Chartered Bank to offer different financial products to cater to the needs of carbon credit buyers. This dovetails with Singapore's aspirations to become a thriving carbon marketplace and demonstrates our support for Asia's transition towards greater sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the impact of COVID-19, there are glimmers of hope. We have seen a shared sense of responsibility where governments, regulators, businesses, and individuals come together to tackle the challenges brought about by the pandemic. If we can bring the same spirit of togetherness in scaling up SDG-sensitive investments, there is hope that we can move closer towards achieving the SDGs by 2030. We look forward to supporting the UNDP's efforts to promote greater investments in the SDGs, including through the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development. Sustainable finance is already one of the Centre's key priorities, and it would be timely to explore how we can further expand our collaboration, bring others on board. I'm confident that this policy dialogue, its distinguished panel of speakers, and the esteemed panelists will provide valuable insights on how sustainable financing can be enhanced. I wish you all a fruitful discussion that will pave the way forward for concrete collaboration. Thank you all very much.